Have you ever heard conservatives state that 80% of all trans youth will detransition? This is wrong, it's debunked, and I'll tell you how. This number comes from the 1995 DSM-4 criteria. The DSM-4 specified something called gender identity disorder. For this disorder, they specified a list of characteristics that you had to have, and they made a glaring error. You did not actually have to identify as another gender in order to be considered gender identity disorder. So Ken Zucker first took these guidelines and essentially diagnosed cis boys who like to put on Elsa costumes and tomboys as having gender identity disorder. Not surprisingly, 80% of them desisted. I will also state that Ken Zucker practiced conversion therapy and his clinic was shut down. The other study that this comes from is 2011 or 2013, a researcher by the name of Dr. Steensma. Dr. Steensma actually treated all of the patients that dropped out of his study as having detransitioned. Dr. Steensma also used the DSM-4 criteria. The modern criteria in the DSM-5 states that you have to consistently, persistently, and insistently identify as another gender for more than 6 months. Under these more stringent criteria, only 2.5% of trans youth detransition. Detransition is rare, it's used in all these hearings to justify gender-affirming care bans, and that needs to stop.
You're out! Change sides. You're out. Change sides.
Where do non-binary people come from?
Dunno.
It all starts in Mesopotamia.
When was that?
2000 BC.
2000 BC.
This civilization was the earliest records of humanity. There are references to types of people who are neither male or female, and the records describe how God created these people, their roles in society, and words for different kinds of them. At the same time, let's skip over to ancient Egypt, shall we? Who also described 3 genders: male, female, and Sekhet. Let's spin the globe one more time, shall we? And we'll go to Southern Asia.
Is this around the same sort of time?
This was actually a little bit later. This was around 400 BC. There are the earliest records of the Hijra people. The Hijra can consider themselves to be neither male or female.
As a whole entire civilization?
Yeah, and they still exist, the Hijra people, although oppressed they are. Next, we have 7th century BC. These are my favourites. The Scythians, who were Eurasian nomadic horse riders. who apparently...
You're making this up.
who apparently honoured gender non-conforming people as priests and warriors. They apparently also invented the earliest known hormone therapy using licorice root.
Wow, just get me licorice root out.
Pre-colonial Native Americans, let's spin that bloody globe again, shall we? Who historically recognised various kinds of genders that all fall under the umbrella of Two-Spirit, which just encompasses the different kinds of genders that they had in the communities that don't fit in the Western gender binary. Now, post-Christ, 1st century, the year 100, there are records stating that classical Judaism actually recognised 6 genders. I can't tell you more information about that because I don't know it. Anglo-Saxon, when did they start recognising non-binary people? The roots of you and I, the British. Because in the 11th century, there was a word found called weapon weithestra, which meant woman with a weapon, which also people believed to be woman with a penis, and may have been a word used to describe queer, intersex, non-binary folk back in the 11th century of Britain.
So it's not a new thing at all.
It's ancient. It's ancient, baby. It goes as far back as time as we know.
The Trans Day of Visibility is coming up soon, and God has granted me the ability to be visible in a place where trans people are rarely seen, in the pulpit. I often get comments saying I'm making a mockery of God's creation, as if this blessing was not bestowed upon me by God themselves. Trans people are blessed. We are sacred. And our transition does not stand in contrast to our revival. It is part of it. Without transition, there would have been no joy for me, no peace, no return to faith. I would have remained dead. There is a reason we call the name we have been given before birth a dead name. The Lord has granted us the opportunity to involve ourselves in the divine act of creation, and like the eunuchs and trans people before me, I have answered that call. As we watch the suicide rates of trans people skyrocket in this country, as we watch people call for our eradication, we must not lose hope. We must not forget our sacredness. We must remember that we have been given a blessing. You are not a mistake. You have been granted a beautiful journey and a unique perspective. The ability to see life through the eyes of both woman and man. It has granted you strength and wisdom. It is not a mistake. You have been given this temple by God, and you may decorate it however you see fit. You are God's child, the same as any other, and you deserve to be reborn into the person you were always meant to be. And when you hear the voice of the devil in your head saying that you don't deserve to be here, you say what Jesus said to him all of those years ago in the desert. Not today. We only get this little bit of time before we too are in the grave. This little morsel of God's creation that is ours. And we can spend it dead, wallowing in misery and hating ourselves, or we can allow ourselves to be reborn. And every path to rebirth is going to look different, depending on our faith, our worldview, our access to resources. So, like midwives, we must assist one another in our rebirths. We must allow each other to make decisions about the people we want to be reborn into. We must not allow each other to stay dead. I know that I will die and be reborn 100 more times in this life. But I also know that when I die for the final time, I have lived a life worth living.